My name's Damien, and I will tell you how a single ultimatum ended a 4-year relationship. When my fiancée looked me dead in the eye and said, "It's either me or them," she thought she knew exactly how I'd respond, because for years I had always chosen her way to keep the peace and avoid conflict. But this time, I didn't bend, and my reaction left her completely stunned. But before you conclude, I will walk you through everything for everything makes sense. I met Liliana, my fiancée, at a casual get-together at a friend's house on a weekend. Liliana came in with a group of girls I hadn't met before. They were beautiful, and that caught my eye. As the event picked up, someone had the idea to break the ice with some team games. As luck would have it, Liliana and I got randomly paired on the same team. We weren't amazing, but we weren't terrible either. We won a few games, lost a couple. But what stuck with me was how well we worked together. She didn't take things too seriously, and she was quick with witty comebacks. We had an easy rhythm, like two people who'd known each other a little longer than a few hours. At the end of the night, I asked for her number to stay in touch. She gave it without hesitation. For the first few weeks, we texted here and there. Honestly, there wasn't any clear romantic tension at the start. But somewhere along the line, things shifted. I can't even tell you the exact moment things got romantic. All I know is that one day we were just friends, and the next we were exploring each other. We started spending more time together. Before I knew it, we were dating, and it felt right. The chemistry was strong. I didn't realize then that just because something starts smoothly, it doesn't mean the road ahead will be the same. But in that moment, back when it all began, it really did feel like the beginning of something solid. Looking back, I see now that the romance clouded my judgment. It was like I put her on a pedestal and ignored anything that didn't fit the perfect image I'd built in my head. There were early signs, things I should have paid attention to. Times when she'd get upset if I disagreed with her, or when she'd give me the silent treatment over minor stuff. But I brushed it off. I assumed that's just how she is, or she's just passionate. I didn't see it for what it really was. It's crazy how you can be so in love with someone that you start telling yourself their red flags are actually personality quirks. You romanticize things you should be questioning. You make excuses. I did that a lot. As the relationship moved forward, I started to notice a pattern. Liliana's love came with terms, unspoken rules I didn't realize I was following. When I agreed with her, went along with her plans, or let her have the final say, she was warm, sweet, and affectionate. It felt good, like I was doing something right. But when I disagreed, when I brought up something she didn't like or tried to suggest a different opinion, it was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, she was distant, cold. Sometimes she'd act like I wasn't even in the room. Other times she'd throw in sarcastic remarks or guilt-tripping comments that made me second-guess myself. I didn't know it at the time, but I was conditioning myself to avoid conflict. I told myself it wasn't worth the argument. I'd rather have peace than another emotional standoff. So, little by little, I stopped speaking up. I started nodding along, agreeing with things I didn't truly feel good about, just to keep the vibe smooth. I lied to myself that I was just being understanding, that compromise was part of love. But the truth? I was walking on eggshells. And the more I did that, the more control she had, which is dressed up as love. That's the thing no one tells you. Sometimes control comes wrapped in kisses, wrapped in "I love you," wrapped in "I just want what's best for us." And you don't see it until you're knee-deep in it, wondering when exactly you stop being honest with yourself. That's where I found myself. So at this point in the relationship, things looked pretty stable on the surface. Both Liliana and I were professionals. Monday through Friday, we each did our thing. She worked in healthcare administration, and I was holding down a corporate job in operations. But come the weekend was when I really came alive. Saturday mornings were my reset button. I co-ran a podcast with two of my closest friends. What started out as a casual idea in a group chat turned into something I actually looked forward to every single week. We weren't pulling Joe Rogan numbers or anything, but it was growing. And more importantly, it fulfilled me. It gave me a space to create, to speak freely, to laugh, to bounce ideas around. It was therapy I didn't have to pay for. We talked about everything: culture, relationships, Personal stories, trending issues, nothing was off limits. But Liliana never liked the podcast. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd roll her eyes a little when I brought it up, or say she was too tired to listen, acting all disinterested. But when she listened, she'd smile and nod when I talked about what we covered, but I could tell her attention wasn't really there. I chalked it up to differences in hobbies. No big deal, right? Then, the disinterest turned into something else. Every time I mentioned the podcast crew, specifically my two co-hosts, she'd tighten up. If I asked her to come to one of our group hangouts, she'd ask who else was coming. And the moment she found out either of them was going to be there, she'd back out saying, "I think I'll sit this one out." At first, I honestly thought it was a personality clash. Maybe she didn't vibe with their humor, or felt left out when we all talked fast and bounced jokes around. That happens sometimes. Not everyone clicks. But I started noticing patterns. Small things, but they added up. Every time I spent time with the guys, she'd be cold with me afterward. If I texted her while I was with them, she'd reply dryly, if at all. When I came home, she'd ask questions like, "So, what did you guys talk about?" Like she was trying to sniff out if they were talking about her, or telling me something she didn't want me to hear. And then I noticed something else. When I canceled plans with the guys, or just didn't bring them up, she'd be happy, playful even. Suddenly, she wanted to hang out. Suddenly everything was sweet. I began to conclude it wasn't just about the podcast anymore. It was about control. I began to understand that she didn't like them as people because she perceived them as being higher than her. They knew me before her. They challenged me. They told me the truth, even when it wasn't easy to hear. And she didn't want that influence around. She didn't want the version of me that had confidence, independence, and perspective. She wanted compliance, quiet agreement, a version of me that didn't come with a circle, just her. She must have heard their opinion about women and life. And I can tell you this now, looking back, once someone starts trying to isolate you from the people who really know and support you, that's not love. That's control disguised as concern. It took me a while to see it, but once I did, everything else started making sense. So yeah, the podcast was never just a podcast. It was the last part of me she couldn't get a grip on, and that made it a problem for her. Over time, the podcast I run with my two closest friends picked up steam. We built an audience and got feedback, some shout-outs, and even sponsorship interest. For the first time in a long time, I felt creatively alive. Naturally, I was excited. I shared the milestones with Liliana. I'd come home buzzing after a great recording or a new listener milestone. I'd try to loop her in, tell her how it was growing. But instead of support, I got cold responses. She didn't even try to pretend anymore. Her word stuck, "You talk more with your podcast crew than you talk with me." Or, "How many people are actually listening anyway?" And the one that hit me hardest, "Do you really need to spend every Saturday with them?" It was like she was slowly trying to shrink something I loved down to nothing. Her resentment wasn't even subtle anymore. That was when I started pulling back from her, emotionally. I stopped sharing updates with her because her reactions drained the joy out of it. What's the point of talking to someone who only tries to make you feel small for caring about something? And the thing is that emotional distance didn't solve anything. It just turned our conversations into landmines. Every little thing became an argument. One day, we were having one of those exhausting, looping arguments again. I don't even remember how it started, but somewhere in the middle of it, she asked me to cut down on the podcast time for us. She tried to frame it like a compromise, like she was asking for connection. But I knew what it really was. I didn't try to explain myself. I told her flat out, "The podcast is the one thing that makes me feel alive outside of work. I'm not giving it up just because you don't like who I'm around." That didn't sit well with her. I saw it in her eyes. She'd gotten used to me bending. But this time I didn't. From there, things snowballed. We'd already gotten engaged by that point. Wedding plans were in motion. But instead of bringing us closer, it brought out every crack we'd been ignoring. Arguments flared more often, and the smallest decisions turned into battlegrounds. One day, in the middle of yet another heated discussion, she just exploded, asking me to pick one. "It's either me or them. You choose." She said it like she expected me to crumble, like I always did. Like she was so sure I'd pick her. But I didn't. I looked at her, and I told her, calm as anything, I'm not quitting the one thing that gives me life just to keep the peace. That was the moment. She took off the ring, told me I'd never see her again. And I just looked her in the eye and said, you should have thought about that clearly before sacrificing a 4-year relationship over an ultimatum you assumed I'd surrender to. And just like that, she walked out expecting me to come running after her, like I always had. I didn't. A full week passed, no texts, no calls. Then she reached out. First with guilt. That was her opening move. She said my friends had poisoned me, turned me against her. She said I chose them over us. That I must have never loved her if I could let a 4-year relationship end just like that. And hearing all that, I just sat there, stunned. Not because I believed any of it, but because I couldn't believe how far off her perspective was. It was like we lived in 2 different realities. In hers, I had betrayed her by setting boundaries. In mine, I had finally stood up for myself. I didn't even argue. I just ended the call before I said something I'd regret. That conversation pushed me into a season of deep reflection. I started replaying moments I had brushed off. I realized how gradually love had turned into submission. It made sense that some people want love that obeys. I wanted love that understood. A few months later, she reached out again. Said she'd been doing some work on herself. She saw where things went wrong. That she missed me, and she changed. I won't lie, hearing that stirred something in me. I didn't jump back in, but I did agree to talk. I gave it time. Gave her a chance. And at first, it was better. She listened more. For a minute, I thought maybe we could rewrite our story with better ink. But slowly, the same patterns started creeping back in. Subtle, but familiar. Guilt when I chose a weekend with the podcast over a weekend with her. Questions that sounded like concern, but felt like control. I saw it this time. I didn't wait for it to grow. I ended it early. Because here's the thing. Sometimes you need the wrong love twice to finally get it right. To finally understand that love isn't supposed to feel like performance. It's supposed to feel like freedom. And once you taste that kind of peace, you can never go back to walking on eggshells and calling it romance. Thanks for sticking with me all the way through. Looking back on everything, there are some hard lessons I had to learn. Lessons I wish someone had spelled out to me a long time ago. First, don't ever tolerate emotional neglect just because you love someone. Love isn't supposed to drain you or make you question your worth every time you express yourself. In my case, I thought being a good partner meant keeping the peace, avoiding arguments, and just letting certain things slide. I didn't realize that what I was doing was slowly shrinking myself just to keep her comfortable. And when you start to lose your voice in your own relationship, that's not love. That's erasure. The second thing? Watch for patterns, not just apologies. Anyone can say sorry after blowing up. Anyone can promise to change. But the real truth is in what they do repeatedly, not what they say occasionally. I was so caught up in the love I wanted to believe in that I ignored the reality in front of me. I learned too late that an apology without change behavior is just manipulation dressed up in soft words. And here's the final one. When someone shows you what you mean to them, believe them. Don't keep hoping they'll one day become the person you made up in your head. She showed me time and time again that what she wanted wasn't a partner. It was a follower. And the moment I stepped outside of that role, even just a little, everything changed. So if someone's love feels like a prize you have to win rather than a place you can rest, that's not love. That's control. Now I want to ask you something real. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If someone you spent 4 years with looked you in the eye and told you it's either them or the thing that makes you feel alive, what would you choose? I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's necessary. If you felt anything in this story that hit home, maybe you saw yourself in parts of it, or it reminded you of someone you care about, do me a favor. Like the video. Share it with someone who might need to hear this right now. Because sometimes, all it takes is hearing that you're not crazy, that your feelings are valid, and that you deserve better to finally walk away. Thanks for being here.